Good afternoon. My name is Barbara Goldenhire, and I am the Environmental Education Manager at the Cape Fear Botanical Garden. Thank you for joining us today for our virtual tour. Today is a special virtual tour because we are going inside two of the buildings in the Heritage Farm complex, the Alexander Carter, the Carter Macaulay Snyder farmhouse from the Alexander Carter family, and the general store that accompanies it. And these two areas of the garden are not open to the general public every time that you visit. Unless we have volunteers here to open them, we can't always keep them open because they have lots of fragile historical pieces. But you're going to get a sneak peek inside today. The Heritage Garden Complex was created in 1996 in order to help preserve the history of farm life in the Cape Fear River area in the early 1900s. And this particular farmhouse was built in 1880 by Alexander Carter, so it is over 100 years old. We're going to go ahead and go on inside. You'll see that we do have a layout here from when we open these buildings for the holidays. We do like to let people inside even though they can't be open every day, and so we open them for holiday lights, a Heritage Day, and other special events. As we come inside, you might see a few things like light switches and emergency lighting that are modern features. When the garden first owned the farmhouse, it was used as the garden's offices as well as a small gift shop and event space. But today, it's just used as an education area and for special events. In this area, the floors, ceilings, and many of the doors and the mantelpiece here are original. But everything has been repainted and resurfaced because it had been stripped. And the bricks in the fireplaces and the chimneys were replaced. They did use bricks from the period, however. The bricks are from 1912, and they were used originally as part of a railroad office. Much of the furniture, though not original to the family, is from that period. So we try to keep a lot of historic pieces in here for people to learn. We do have a working record player over there, and a photo book from the time. One thing that could be a little bit disconcerting to some people, but was very historical at the time, is that you may see pictures of children who were actually already dead in the book. When children died, something very sad that happened in that time period, they would actually take pictures to commemorate them, dress nicely, and so you can see, for example, this picture of the child with their eyes closed. Is probably a commemorative picture of a child who had already passed. On this table, we also have a Sears catalog from a long time ago. You can see it's the size of a thick book with lots of detailed things. And the prices have changed quite a bit. For example, a pen holder is 3 cents per order. Now let's walk into the hallway area here. You'll see a spindle. Textiles, particularly cotton textiles, were, along with tobacco, one of the most important industries in this area of North Carolina. And this area of North Carolina would have had mostly small family farms. In fact, there were 4 times as many farms in North Carolina in this period as there are today. This bedroom is currently set up as a sewing area and a place for a small baby. But in the past, it actually probably would have had to house more than just one baby. The Alexander Carter family could have had up to 13 people living in this house at one time. They lived in the house through the 1940s, and they actually had 10 kids and a nephew who lived with them at one point. So that's up to 13 people in the small house. So probably not a one room just for the baby. This area of North Carolina was not large plantation farms, unlike many of the other areas of South Carolina and parts of Virginia. There was a little bit of sharecropping, but not as much. It was mostly family farms, but segregation did continue all the way through the 1970s, and there was some history of racism. So you will see like this historic doll that we have, which would probably be considered offensive to most people today, so it wouldn't be something we wouldn't have if it wasn't from the period. And you also can see another doll in a baby carriage. This is actually a toy from that time period, so a rather nice little historical piece. This area here that we have glassed off would have actually been open, so that the family could have slept out here in the summer when it was hot, and they would have slept in the kitchen or the living room when it was cold in the winter. This room, set up like a child's bedroom, you can see that we have a rope bed frame, as well as the quilt, which has a nice little note, something that I did not know, made by Louis E. Bowers in the early 1900s. You can also see in this corner, there's a chamber pot, and one of the things I like to tell kids, school kids, when we do tours, is that it actually would have been the child's job to empty this out into the outhouse in the morning. The early 1900s were a time of great development in this area of North Carolina, but electricity didn't reach the most rural areas until after World War II. So in this early 1900s, the State Highway Commission is being formed, electricity is reaching the cities, but it hasn't reached a lot of these places. Plumbing wouldn't have reached here. They'd still be using that outhouse. As we come this way, and here we have a parent's bedroom. You can see a dress that would probably have been a morning dress, as well as a framed chamber pot chair. And we'll come into the kitchen here, which is one of my favorite rooms in this house. It has just quite a few really interesting pieces, including this phone, a historic phone, so you can compare the size to the smartphone that you probably have in your pocket. These cast iron pots that they would have used for heating were really important because the whole pot could be heated, so it could heat all the way around in the fire. And that was really important to be able to cook a little faster on the fire than they had been able to before that. You'll also see this really nice stove over here and an iron on it. The iron is really interesting. It's quite heavy if you hold it. It feels like quite a lot of weight. And they actually would have had to have, most families would have had multiples of these, and they would have had to heat them on the stove, and then it would be hot for a little bit to use for ironing, and burns were very common, so we're glad we don't have to do that today. Getting food was also quite a little bit trickier than it is today. Most families ate a mix of wild food, like deer and turkey that they hunted, things that they gathered, as well as things that they grew. Livestock, like hogs were the most common, would have been a big communal event. So the whole community would have come together if they would have killed a hog to eat, or other livestock. And women helped with the care of animals too, which wasn't common all across of North Carolina and other places. But because this area is more rural, women had to pitch in with everything. And that was sometimes explained in those times as women being able to extend their caring instinct, mothering instinct that they cared for children, to care for animals and crops as well. You'll also see in our kitchen here that we have the tools they used to do laundry by hand, as well as to churn butter. So they would have had to bring in milk from the cow, let it sit for about an hour, let the cream separate, and then churn that cream into whipping cream and eventually into butter using a butter churn like this. And if you want the chance to use either of these, stop by at Heritage Day sometime, and we usually get those out for kids to be able to have a chance to use them. Go ahead and head outside so we can go look at the general store. The Heritage Garden itself, you'll see as we head outside, is actually surrounded by an educational garden that originally featured some plants from the time period, but it also features a lot of plants that are used in cooking, as well as different kinds of spices and herbs and vegetable garden, the proceeds of which are donated to the Second Harvest Food Bank. The Cumberland County Master Gardeners, as well as our garden volunteers, help us maintain all of these areas. So we're really thankful for all of that help. And you'll know that volunteers do so much of that work as we see these beautiful plants that we're about to walk by. From an education perspective, we use most of that area for really teaching kids about food and where the things that we eat come from and how plants like that would have been grown. So that's really cool to do. We also use a lot of the elements, plants that they can sniff, like herbs like mint and bay leaves and sage leaves, and things that they can touch, like lamb's ear, as a sensory garden for our younger kids and kids with special needs. This right here with the red flowers is actually a pomegranate tree. So there's something not native, but has some food, another tree with food on it. And you'll see the beautiful in bloom McCollum Heritage Garden. I'll just walk over here a second so we can see some of the beautiful blooms that we have, including, I think this is lemon balm. Yep, which is a type of mint, and they would have used it in flavorings for soap. Really nice.
Here's a full view of the farmhouse as well.
Yeah. And it does have, it came with these outside buildings. They were from the original property, the general store, the log corn crib over there, which would have been used to store machinery as well as to store corn. There's a well over there as well as a bell. The tobacco barn, which is on the back of the property, if you look at our earlier Heritage Garden outside tour, you'll see that building was actually built in the 1930s. It was added in the last one. But these ones up here are original. The whole farmhouse was located originally in Eastover, North Carolina, and it was moved here. And some places like the general store were moved as well. That's pretty cool. I do like to show kids who visit. We have a cut wood pile here. Wood burning would have been very important, but you can see one piece of wood that looks a little bit different, and that is actually a beaver chewed piece instead of a piece cut by an axe. You'll also see some of the old-fashioned signs along the sides of the building. We have a lot of historic signs. The general store was very much a gathering place for the community. During hard times and economic downturns, coming together and working with their neighbors was very important historically. And so areas like this would have been set up so that they could do something like what we have, play checkers and hang out in this space. The early 1900s were also very much a time when new products were arriving. Mills and factories were growing. And so many of these new products, people were just going from having to can everything themselves and only selling what they could grow to being able to purchase things like these cans up here that were made in factories. You may notice it's like a little scavenger hunt. One or two that have been stuck in places that are not as old as the others, not as historical. So have fun looking out for if you can find those. We also do have some cotton in the different phases of development, going from the plant to like work cotton to cotton used in making finer garments there. And cotton would have been a very, very important crop for them. And I do like to show children how many bits are in it, how hard it would have been to work it with your hands. Come over here. You can see a lot of the canned and stored food. Very important. This piece was actually used to sow seeds. In this particular case is one of the funner areas to look for, see if you can spot the outliers. So that Vantage Ultra lights is a type of cigarettes that actually would have been from more like the 70s or the 80s. So that's one that's not as historical as the others. It got put in here before it was checked all the way. Those fly traps as well, you can tell that the packaging is modern packaging. But there are some really cool items in here, like these cups, which actually have a rest for a guard for the mustache, for men's mustaches. Neat little feature. I think it's cool to check out the old-fashioned cash register as well. We have some homemade lye soap, so they would have actually used lye as well as lard and water to create their own homemade soap. So quite a bit of work going into creating that. Well, Leah, do we have any questions online?
No, we don't have any questions. Everyone just misses us.
All right. Well, let us know if you have any questions, and thank you for chiming in and watching today. And we hope you'll come out to the garden and visit us. And we also hope you'll check out online our book, 200 Plus Ways to Explore Nature, and see us next week for our next live presentation back at 11. And do look out for this weekend. The garden is having a bear hunt for kids to enjoy and get out while social distancing this weekend. So check that out. You can win some prizes if you get all the bears. All right, thanks. Bye.